It's a mission they didn't expect they'd have to complete: evacuate and shutter an entire embassy amidst gunfire and hostile streets. Now, it led to the longest land-based evacuation by Canadian Armed Forces in the history of its service to diplomatic missions. And it wasn't completed by a team of special forces, but by a team of soldiers untrained in this realm, outnumbered, outgunned, and under-equipped. 10 years later, and most of us still haven't heard of Operation Lobe, and specifically the 6th Rotation, the team that actually evacuated the Canadian embassy in Libya. And now there are calls for that to change.
You want to go for a walk? You want to go for a walk?
Captain Andrew Goff recently retired from both the London Police Services and the Armed Forces. His wall is lined with the accolades he's earned from both professions. But he sees a gaping hole in his citations: an acknowledgement for the successful completion of the longest evacuation in Canadian Armed Forces history of diplomatic service.
With the way the world was going at that time, with the ISIS threat emerging, I'm not sure we were a priority, but we can be a priority now. And we can have another look at this. We can do what's fair and what's right, and do something for these members that did something extraordinary for us.
Something could be done, something should be done.
Now retired Sergeant Stephen Cruikshank agrees. You've spent a lot of time in Afghanistan, you've done 3 tours, and yet Libya seems to have hit you just a little bit differently. Why's that?
Really, I lost my faith in chain of command. That's what happened.
Wow.
Yeah. I came home and I left.
When the 6th rotation of Operation Lobe landed in Libya in early 2014, the climate was relatively calm. Different militia were forming government, Gaddafi had been disposed, and the country was recovering from the Benghazi attack, where the U.S. ambassador and several American diplomats were killed. But the tide shifted during this team's deployment. They were there to protect the Canadian embassy and its staff, but ended up living in near civil war conditions, subject to regular gunfire, and were trapped once the Tripoli airport was destroyed. They had to evacuate the Canadian embassy without the equipment or the training needed for that feat.
The damage this has caused amongst many members of that task force, to the point where I'll say there's a good chunk of them with a mental health injury as a result of the mission, what we were able to accomplish. And I do believe that the lack of recognition for some of them doing something that was extraordinary has certainly contributed to the sanctuary trauma and their mental health injury. I'm not saying that the recognition is going to fix them, us, or me, but I do believe that it is right and it is fair to acknowledge the members of Rotation 6 for doing something that they needed us to do.
Retired Major Doug Henderson, the task force commander, has asked us to conceal his appearance for privacy. What can Canada do to recognize and acknowledge your team's mission and its success?
Right now, the only real important thing would be to have the Canadian Armed Forces operational mission list include our mission. It wasn't a typical mission package, if you want to call it that. It was made up of military policemen, medical people, logistics people, intelligence people, a signaler, and we were doing jobs that were not typical of our training.
The Department of National Defense says that honors have been awarded for those involved in Operation Lobe, but couldn't provide any evidence of the evacuation being recognized. A spokesperson adds, there is a 5-year limit for nominating individuals for Canadian Armed Forces honors in relation to the service it's meant to recognize. Therefore, no further honors will be awarded in relation to Operation Lobe.
Take a fresh look at this, look at who did what in the accomplishment of that team and that mission, and go, okay, we need to revisit this. And there's plenty of things going around, the 5-year limit, and all that stuff is true, but it's not true. There's processes for waivers that I know have happened as recently as this year with other units. If they want to do something, they can.
To pin something on their chest, whether it be a meritorious service medal or at the very least a CJOC commendation.
Conservative Deputy Leader Melissa Lanceman made a promise to rectify that.
We hear you, we see you, we recognize the sacrifice of you and your team, and soon there will be a government in this country that does it officially.
It's not clear what the recognition would look like, but Henderson says he knows what it shouldn't be.
I don't know if someone standing up in Parliament it's all that important to anybody. The important part is having the Canadian Armed Forces recognize that we had a bunch of non-combat arms guys go into a situation and we accounted ourselves extremely well.
Although Rotation 6 was successful in closing the embassy, traversing 800 kilometers through difficult and often hostile terrain, and getting its charges to Tunis safely, there were casualties. For some, it was their health. For other members, their careers.
It would be a great gesture because there's some people on that task force that are hurting. I might be one of them. And I care enough to talk about it. And I'll continue to talk about it until I think that justice has been done.
It's not clear what, if anything, will be done to honor the members of the 6th rotation of Operation Lobe. But sharing their story is one way of ensuring that their heroics and their accomplishments aren't forgotten. Cristina Howorun, City News.